Panned out in the stock markets on Dalal Street, where the markets opened flat for the day after multiple consecutive sessions of gains, scaling new peaks. Both the Sensex and the Nifty markets this morning opening flat, and it closed flat as well. No major gains. However, it was indeed a volatile session during the day. Suyash, talk to us about it.
So after a 6-day rally, Indian markets did witness some profit booking today and ended on a mixed to flat note. At close, Sensex was down about 33 points or 0.05% at 65,446 levels, while Nifty rose 9.5 points or 0.05% to close just shy of the 19,400 levels at 19,398 points. Now, the broader market still managed to outperform the benchmarks. At close, Nifty Mid-Cap 100 was up about 0.71% and the Nifty Small Cap Index ended 0.74% higher. Now, despite today's volatility, the market valuation of all BSE listed firms touched a lifetime high of 300 lakh crore. Among sectoral indices, auto, FMCG, PSU banks and oil and gas indices were up 1%, whereas banking counters after the recent run-up witnessed some profit booking.
I was just about to ask about that because banking stocks have been certainly in news, be it the HDFC twins or the IDFC twins. If you can tell us some idea of how things panned out for them.
So HDFC Bank and HDFC were in focus last week as the merger was due, and the stocks ran up about 4% each. Even the PSU banking space has been rallying for the last 6 odd days. It has run up about 10% in the last year. In the last quarter, actually, it is up about 18%. So the asset quality is improving for the banking sector. Despite the high interest rate environment, the asset quality, the NPA ratios are improving for the banking sector. The loan book is getting stronger. So all these factors really bode well for the banking space. And since their profitability is, moving forward will improve, there is some expectations, that the rally should continue in the banking sector.
All right. Banking stocks, both, and by that you mean both public sector banking stocks and private sector, both all kinds of banking stocks.
Although HDFC Bank and HDFC did end lower today, they were among the top losers in the Nifty pack. HDFC Bank fell about 3%, whereas HDFC was down about 2.94%.
Right. And if you have a check on IDFC as well, Suyash, by any chance?
IDFC was up about 2%, sorry.
Right. So IDFC up for the day, HDFC down for the day. But the fact of the matter is that the banking story is loud and clear on Dalal Street. Great gains in the last quarter, in the last month, and the gains are only set to continue going forward. At least that's what Suyash's reading of the charts are telling us. Thank you, Suyash, for joining us here and getting us a lowdown really of what stock markets are looking like. A great rally, a bit of a tepid session for the day, snapping the 6-day run for gains. However, we still have 2 more trading sessions for the week, so we'll see how the markets wrap up the week come Friday. But for now, thank you, Suyash, for joining us with that market update. Time now to move on away from the stock markets and to the big story that we are tracking, and that is on the e-invoicing facility that the GST department of the government of India has been pushing, and now the latest is that small businesses will be brought under GST e-invoicing, and even businesses without a GST registration number, so to speak, can avail facilities starting the 1st of October, use the e-invoicing facilities and make sure there's an electronic invoice for all of their transactions. Bear in mind, e-invoicing is meant for business-to-business transactions, and that is something that's meant to provide more formality and more organization and make sure the tax collection is right and tax paying is right. We have Mr. AS Bisla, Senior Advisor, Indirect Tax at CII, joining us here live on the broadcast. Mr. Bisla, thank you so much for joining us. I want to begin by asking you, talk to us per se about the efforts made towards e-invoicing and what does the latest move mean? The latest move means that small businesses will have to compulsorily get into e-invoicing starting the 1st of July.
Yes, please. So the concept of e-invoicing is, I think, excellent on the part of the government. You see, it will not only reduce the chances of evasion of taxes, but it will also be helpful for auto population of the data to the traders' environment.
But we will re-establish a connection with Mr. Bisla and get him back on the show for you. But fact of the matter is that it's a great initiative from the government as far as bringing more transparency in business transactions are concerned. The GST e-invoicing has been pushed for the last 6 months or so, and now it is now come under the ambit of all small businesses. We have Mr. Prashanth Agarwal, partner, PWC India, Indirect Tax, also joining us in the broadcast. Prashanth Agarwal, thank you so much for being with us. Talk to us per se about e-invoicing, a measure that has been pushed by the GST department for the last 6 months, and now the latest move to bring in all small businesses under compulsory e-invoicing, and even those without a GST registration number can do e-invoicing for their online transactions.
Yeah, thanks for having me here, firstly. So this e-invoicing, just to correct you, has been as a measure introduced in India since October 2020. And we started with the largest taxpayers, and we starting from 500 crores and above of turnover. And from 1st August, it will come down to 5 crores. And you rightly said, in October, there is further measure to bring it down. As far as the measure is concerned, it is basically just to help our viewers understand, it is registering your invoice with the government through a portal which is known as Invoice Registration Portal, or IRP as they call it. The government, in order to ensure that they can scale up to handle these kind of taxpayers or these number of taxpayers, recently had 4 new IRPs introduced, in fact 5 new IRPs introduced. In terms of benefits that we see from both government and taxpayers point of view, from a government standpoint, of course, if you see even the analysis of how the return filing compliances have improved over the last 2 years, which is almost 50% increase from a 63 million returns being filed to 93 million returns being filed, and subsequently, obviously, the increase in the tax buoyancy that we see across. That's one part of it, which means more formalization of the economy per se, and the whole ecosystem is now trying to be more compliant from a GST standpoint. So that's the benefit that government sees out of the whole e-invoicing protocol. For the industry, as Mr. Bisla was trying to suggest, that there is an auto population of data, which means facilitating the compliance of the industry. But the biggest game changer for the industry would be once the government starts publishing this data from a supplier standpoint to its buyer in a digital format. So understand it this way, that today what happens is, if I'm a buyer of a particular goods in a B2B transaction, I actually do a AP process, which is the accounts payable process, largely manually, booking of the invoice. The moment I have this digital invoice with me, I would be able to automate the process of whole accounting or accounts payable, which in a way would be a big relief to the industry once they are able to do that. So that's a big game changer which will come in. We hope the GSTN, which is the nodal body undertaking all the administration of tax in India through technology, would enable this publishing of data, which a supplier is raising as an invoice, registering with the government portal with the buyer. And that would be a big change per se.
Right. If I were to ask you, Prashanth, if I were a consumer, an average, layman on the street who's not a business owner, were to look at this piece of news and see e-invoicing as a major move, how would this eventually impact the consumer on the street?
So see, for consumer on the street, what they would see is that more of formalization of economy, as I said, that's the benefit which comes in, that everyone would be more or less transacting them in the right manner. E-invoicing per se directly doesn't have an impact from an end customer standpoint, unless the government starts asking the businesses to also publish these invoices, which are B2C. As of now, as you rightly said, it is B2B. If it moves to B2C, that is when the end customers will get impacted. Today, B2C is largely not impacted via e-invoicing. There's a different provision which requires government to provide a dynamic QR code on the invoice, which enables the payment of the transaction by a customer. For the end customer, the incentivization which the government intends to do is certainly something different, which is Mera Bill, Mera Adhikar, which is where if the government introduces that, that would mean if I and you ask our seller to give the invoice which is GST compliant, we may have a lottery system which the government may introduce, whereby we may be incentivized for having a formal transaction with our retailers rather than doing it, let's say, on cash.
Right. I'm asking this only because I think it's a good time then to ask the question that is it time for how long before e-invoicing reaches B2C, as in business to consumer?
So see, I think B2C, whether you really need e-invoicing is also an important question to answer in our kind of a dynamics where you have significant amount of, you're talking about 140 billion people transacting in some way or the other with commercial transactions. So whether we need that kind of a requirement at this stage, I think it has to be a phase-wise approach. It would take some more time before it reaches that level. Covering all B2B transactions is extremely important because that is where the tax leakage is seen largely. From a government standpoint, even the credits, GST credits that we talk about, fake credits, fake invoicing, all of that would be taken care of as we move the whole journey through e-invoicing. B2C large, which is let's say a 2.5 lakh above transaction, is something that the government can look at from an e-invoicing standpoint. But I still think there is some distance to cover before we see all invoices across India getting covered through e-invoicing per se.
Right. More than e-invoicing, this piece of news really attracted me because of that factor that a small business without a GST registration number can now sell online and also generate e-invoicing as well. That's very important. And Prashanth, isn't that, in that sense, will that not affect the consumer eventually in a very positive way? More and more small businesses will be able to sell their wares online.
Yeah, so I think let's divide this part into two. I think the first part that you said, which is enabling an unregistered dealer in our language, which is a small tax payer, to sell goods online, that definitely is a big boost to the online or to the small sellers, because now their reach goes beyond their own territory to other territories per se within India. So that definitely will have a big impact for the consumer as well, because now I have more to choose from. And for imagine the MSMEs, the reach that they can enable through the e-commerce players is immense. So I think that will definitely have an impact regardless of whether it is e-invoicing requirement or not, because that I still think government will have to shell out more details as to how they would undertake the whole e-invoicing part of it. But formalizing that part and bringing them a bigger territory to deal with, really going to be a big boost to the economy as well.
A big boost to the economy. How do you see this, furthering other agendas for the country, which is, greater widening the tax net and greater tax collection and greater accountability for businesses that operate in the country?
Yeah, so I think that's where e-invoicing has hit positively to the government. As I said earlier, if you track the numbers, starting with, let's say, the number of taxpayers who were involved, they were 90 or let's say 90 lakhs prior to e-invoicing. They are more than 1.4 crores now. So that shows how the compliance is increasing. If you look at the number of returns which is getting filed from, let's say, 63, 64 million returns, they are now at 94 million returns post e-invoicing over last 2.5 years when the e-invoicing has been compliant with. If you look at the numbers of revenues, we all know how the revenue has been increasing over a period of time. Of course, economy has played a big role, but as the more number of taxpayers come into the net and more returns are getting filed, that also means the government is able to increase the amount of revenue that they are collecting as part of GST as well.
Right, and talk to us in terms of the aggregate turnovers, the applicability that you see the graphics over there. So you have 500 crores, 100 crores, 50 crores, 20 crores, 10 crores. Now this kind of slabs for e-invoicing under GST. Now I want your thoughts on that, Prashanth.
Yeah, so this basically, as I said earlier, it was a phase-wise approach through which the government introduced e-invoicing. What you see on your screen, 500 crore was the first limit which came about, which was the largest taxpayers in India to basically comply with the e-invoicing requirement, which has been gradually reduced. So within 3 months, the government reduced it to 100 crores, then brought it down to 50 crores, then it to 20 crores, 10 crores, 5 crores. So the idea is increase the ambit of taxpayers who have to do e-invoicing. One has to really remember this part, that e-invoicing requires you technology enablement as well. So not only does it mean more people coming into formal economy, but it also requires, or let's say forces a trader or a small taxpayers to adopt technology more. And therefore, one of the things that the taxpayers will have to now be very careful about is how well are they complying with this e-invoicing, because this cannot be done manually. This is not a manual process possibility. They will have to have a, let's say, a formal ERP or a billing system, which has to then integrate with the government system to basically transmit the invoice data, which is digital, from their billing system to the government portal and receive that information back. And that, if the traders and the small taxpayers are also able to adopt to, which means that we are reaching out to the last mile taxpayers to automate their, digitalize their whole accounting and the e-invoice compliance. I think that will be a big advantage over a period of time to the traders. And I think that's adaptability is where the challenge may come across initially, as to whether these taxpayers are able to adopt to these systems and how government can enable them. I think that would be very, very important.
Right. If I were to ask you one more thing, what this does is essentially make the industry review every company has to review who their vendors are, who are the vendors supplying goods and services to them, and also to make sure that with respect to the availing of input tax credit. So because of this order, which means that from the 1st of August, all businesses have to do e-invoicing. All the big companies, who have vendors of all shapes and sizes will need to review their vendor agreements.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just vendor agreements, but the whole process as far as their ERPs or any other accounting softwares are concerned, how they are onboarding the vendor, how they are processing their invoices, whether they are compliant from all GST perspective or not, is something which the companies have been looking at. Because see, e-invoice has been there for now almost 2 years. Almost 50 crores and above vendors are already covered, 10 crores vendors are covered. So ideally the companies should have been in this process, and now it becomes even more imminent for companies to do that, because they would only want to pay the vendor when they are compliant from an e-invoicing perspective. If they're not compliant from an e-invoicing perspective, it also means, as you rightly said, there is a risk of the companies not being allowed to avail the GST credits, which is a big hit to the bottom line itself from a business standpoint. So you're very right that the companies have to look at contracts, they have to look at their IT systems, the process controls that have to be built in to manage their vendors. So the whole vendor management system becomes extremely important. As I said, starting from the vendor onboarding to a purchase order to when the vendor invoice comes in and when you actually make the payment of those invoices to the vendor.
Right, and what does it mean for others? Who, for example, for individuals with the GST registered numbers who are buying from vendors of all shapes and sizes. So many people took to making their own business or own entrepreneurship, which got and registered their own GST numbers during the pandemic, when many of them are working out of home. What does it mean for them?
So again, depending on the class of taxpayer that we are dealing with, if he's a composition dealer, he doesn't get the credit access. So they may not get that much of an impact. But overall, everyone have to analyze their own situation, ensure that not only they are compliant from an e-invoicing standpoint, but also their ecosystem, as I explained earlier on the vendor side, which again, just to re-emphasize, requires automation, adopting better technology to be able to deal with this kind of a system. See, the government has been way ahead of the curve from a technology enablement standpoint, at least under GST. It is about us as individual proprietors or partnership firms or companies who are catching up on this. And government is only going far ahead in terms of using the technology better. And hence it's important for us to also evaluate ourselves as to whether we are up to it or not.
Right, stay with us, Prashanth. We also have Mr. AS Bisla, Senior Advisor, Indirect Tax at CII, joining us on the broadcast live. Mr. Bisla, lovely to have you back on the broadcast to talk to us. From your perspective, what does e-invoicing has been pioneered? It's been in the works for a while, but now all the small businesses, the smallest of businesses in the country, will be brought into the ambit of e-invoicing. It's compulsory for them from the 1st of August. And what's more, even small businesses without a GST registration can now buy and sell online, can transact online and get their e-invoicing done without a GST number.
Sir, earlier we used to hear that in the foreign countries, the concept is there that you just ask for the bill and it is routing through some government portal and it is seamless, it is, you see, visionless. Now the concept has been introduced in India and it has been introduced in a graded manner, starting from the large taxpayers, then reducing to lower. And now it will be a very good concept if it can be further made optional even for the smallest taxpayers or non-taxpayers. I think it is a good initiative. It's a win-win for all the consumers as well as the taxpayers, and it will bring the informal economy to the formal economy, and everybody, I think, will be benefited with this initiative.
Right, it's a wonderful initiative. Tell us in terms of, from your perspective, e-invoicing with the way it has gone from the year 2020 when it was about 500 crore rupees and now brought down to this level to 5 crore rupees. It's been quite the climb down.
No, it's not quite climb down. It was expected very much in the beginning itself, but since the system has to be robust and industry also needs, or taxpayers also need to develop their system to bring it at par with the requirements. So the government has gradually reduced it to 5 crore rupees. And systematic reduction in the turnover is, I think, good for both.
Right, but my question is that does it in any way complicate things further for small businesses with limited resources?
No. It doesn't require any will source. It is very simple. Everybody is now having, you see, internet connections. It can be even paid up through mobile also. We can reach out from any place. India is, I think, fastest growing in the technology.
All right, fair enough. So my question is also, I was just asking Prashanth this: all the companies, in India so far who have vendors of all shapes and sizes of all of all ticket sizes, they will need to review their vendor agreements because of this change in e-invoicing guidelines.
So why to renew their or change their vendor agreements? I don't feel so any such requirement is over there. It is very simple. Once you are giving manual invoices, paperless now will be introduced. So it can be transported easily. Also, even scanned copy can be sent. Even the QR code will do. So even on the transit, it will be easy to verify whether it is a genuine tax invoice or not.
Right.
So I don't feel it is a burden. I don't feel it is a burden to the any business person.
All right, it's not a question of a burden. I'm just wondering how it is going to play out going forward. How does it change the playground, the playing field, so to speak, right now? I was going to ask Prashanth. So many of us got GST numbers, wanted to begin their own businesses during the pandemic. We also have vendors. They also have vendors. Individuals who have GST numbers also have vendors that they get supplies from, services from, and goods from. So how do they need to be careful going forward? Mr. Bisla, if you can hear me.
Yeah. So I don't feel there was any problem for getting GST registration even during pandemic. It was just a time-bound allocation of GST registration. Now government has launched a special drive for re-verification of those registration numbers where it was found to be misused in any manner. So anybody can start any business even right now and they will get instant GST number. You see the figures of increase of the taxpayers. It is tremendous. We talk about last 6 years. It is, I think, doubled till date.
All right, fair enough, Mr. Bisla and Mr. Prashanth Agarwal. Thank you so much for taking time out to join us and help us understand how important e-invoicing is going to be for businesses across India. Time now to move on to the other big story that we're tracking over here, and that has to do with something that affects you, the consumer, something that you always talk about, something that you always thought was absolutely safe, but now it looks like it's not. One of the world famous artificial sweeteners used in all your favorite diet colas and diet beverages that you love having because you think that you're doing the right thing by not having something that's loaded with the regular sugar. These artificial sweeteners that we're talking about, one of the most famous artificial sweeteners in the world, is now under the cloud of being a carcinogen, and no less than the World Health Organization has flagged concerns and warned that this particular artificial sweetener is a carcinogen, as in consumption of it over a period of time can lead to cancerous problems, can lead to you getting cancer. I'm talking about aspartame, one of the most famous artificial sweeteners in the world, used by everybody in India and across the world. Aspartame, it was originally meant to be benign, absolutely no side effects, no issues, nothing worth people should be concerned about. But now, straight from absolutely nothing, we have a situation where straight from benign, and we now move to a situation where it is now being called a carcinogen. We have Mr. Dr. Dipanjan Panda, Senior Consultant Oncology, Indraprastha Apollo Hospital, set to join us as we try to understand aspartame. And we have Mr. Maitra also joining us in the studio. Thank you so much for being with us, sir. Talk to us. This is incredible because none of us really thought this was going to be such a big problem. Leave alone a problem, we never thought this was even a small problem. But from a small problem, it's been now flagged as one of the biggest problems in the world, a cancer-causing ingredient.
So I think it's a big announcement and a labeling of this product. I think aspartame is used in most diet sodas, and it has also usage in everything which is called low sweet products. So it's just not sodas but several other drugs, and if you're buying a low calorie product, you'll often find aspartame in it. So this is a big announcement. I think this puts overall artificial sweeteners also under a cloud, because aspartame is not the only artificial sweetener. There are others like sucralose which may also be brought into under a cloud. So this is a big announcement from a health point of view, and obviously the right thing to do is to get off diet colas and such products. But again, how much of that will happen will depend on the amount of push the regulators make on labeling or even banning the substance in food.
I want to understand this better. Aspartame is one artificial sweetener, and one of the most ubiquitous, so to speak. It's used in all these diet beverages and etc. etc. But what about the artificial sweeteners that we get, that we can buy over the counter?
So again,
are they okay?
No. So again, most of the artificial sweeteners over the counter are aspartame. Some of the more expensive ones are actually sucralose. So again, if you look at even sugar-free, for example, the standard sugar-free brand is aspartame, whereas the sugar-free Natura brand is sucralose. So that is slightly more expensive. So obviously there's a categorization. There's obviously stevia, which is a plant-based, I would say, sweetener, which is also more expensive. So it just means that if you are interested in having low sugar drinks, you have to pay more, because I think aspartame is dangerous. And by the way, the rumors of aspartame being a carcinogen have been around for several years. I think if you look at, it's not something new, which is why.
But what has changed now? I mean, if you can tell us, if these studies go on and on and on and on, but why is it that we have to be concerned about this now?
So the WHO study is significant because it labels it officially, right? So there is some credibility associated with the study. Now the action will depend on what the regulators do. Now if you look also intelligently at Coke, the Diet Coke product is still aspartame based, but the Coke Zero product is actually based on sucralose. So again, there also it doesn't affect all diet soda. So I think the interesting thing to note is how will health regulators and food regulators respond to this labeling, right? In a lot of other cases, there could be three actions. One is do nothing, which is usually the response of most regulators. Second is a labeling, which you can ask, the cans can be labeled as carcinogenic. Or third is absolute banning, right? Unless you take sharp measures, I don't think there'll be any big movement towards giving these up, because this can be countered by marketing. And I don't think a lot of people who consume diet sodas will be deterred by the fact that it has aspartame, which may be carcinogenic. But again, this is official.
Right, even now, it's going to be termed, it's yet to be termed a carcinogen. Yeah. Even as of today, as we have this discussion, aspartame is perfectly fine. It is not a carcinogen, but the World Health Organization study has flagged concerns that it could potentially be a carcinogen. My question here is that which artificial sweetener then is safe? My point is that, the level of diabetes rates in India and especially in South Asia, where, the need for sugar-free, anything, sugar-free beverages, sugar-free food, all of it is extremely high, and the demand for artificial sweeteners is very high. So what is the best way of going about choosing an artificial sweetener?
One is not consume any sugar, right? So I'll give you two responses, right? One, it's very hard to say which is safe, because the consumption of these products has been less than a year. You typically need to do investigation over a longitudinal period of a decade at least. So maybe all artificial sweeteners may be found carcinogenic in the long term. So there's no right answer to which is safe. If you talk to doctors, they will also discourage you to consume artificial sweeteners. It's not that the doctor will tell you don't have Diet Coke, right? And don't have Coke. A doctor will rarely tell you to switch from a Coke to a Diet Coke. So again, in the long term, it's good to avoid such products in general, rather than trying to say this will be safer than the other. It's quite likely 5 years later, after you have enough data, some other products may be found to be carcinogenic, or none of them may be carcinogenic at all.
Oh, okay. So all or none, you never know. We have Dr. Dipanjan Panda, Senior Consultant Oncology, Indraprastha Apollo Hospital, joining us now live on the broadcast. Dr. Panda, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. Which artificial sweetener is safe? If aspartame, which is the most ubiquitous artificial sweetener, which is there in all the diet colas and diet beverages, is not safe, what is safe?
So I think the question has two parts, whether it is safe or whether it is carcinogenic.
Yes.
Now, the problem about artificial sweeteners being carcinogenic is the debate is not new. It is going on since 60s. Unfortunately, there has been data from the animal studies which has found that use of aspartame has shown to increase some of the malignancies, including brain cancer, brain tumor, and some other visceral tumor. However, when you look at the major epidemiological study, it is not that convincing. So the major studies has shown the constant use of artificial sweetener may have some role in increasing cancer. The ratio of, if we do a case control study, there have been one major study from France, which has shown the ratio of, there is slightly increase in the incidence of cancers. It is about 1.3:1. But having said that, any form of artificial sweetener is not good for health.
Okay. I only asked this question, Dr. Panda, because I was asking Mr. Barnik the same thing as well. You know, we are a country, I mean, we are a region. South Asia is known to be most prone to diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, if I want to be more specific. And, the demand for artificial sweeteners from Indians and South Asians is extremely high. We come from a market where there's always a need to cut out sugar. So are you telling us that, like, the only way of dealing with this is that you actually cut out sugar? Not even a placebo is good enough.
Free sugar is not good for health. No, it is for nobody's good that you consume a lot of free sugar. And there is no way to deny that artificial sweetener is no better than conventional sugar. So yes, if we can avoid them, that's the best. Not only it is carcinogenic or it is not carcinogenic, it is simply not good for your health. It gives you loads of calories, which is not good. And that can lead to many other problems, including exposure. You are right, we are on the diabetic capital of the world, and it can lead to many other problems, including liver diseases. So, absolutely. But what I'm trying to tell you is that the lab data has shown that aspartame can cause cancers in mice. The human data, the robustness is slightly less, but if you do sufficient number of people, real robust epidemiological data, it is possible that it show that yes, it can cause cancer.
Okay. Dr. Panda, stay with us. Let me just take this back to Mr. Barnik. Looking at all those visuals, Mr. Barnik, all I can think of is what's going to happen to all those advertisements. What's going to happen to all those products on the shelves that are already there? What does it mean for companies? Were WHO to confirm this study and brand and classify aspartame as a carcinogen, what happens to all those diet beverages on our shop shelves?
Short answer, nothing happens unless the regulator steps in and takes drastic measures. So I think people will still continue consuming. The ad machines will still run. As I said, most of these companies have non-aspartame products as well. Coke Zero is a sucralose based product. So if any, they will change the mix and move towards sucralose. But in the short term, nothing happens. This is another fancy study. I don't think people who consume these products.
And that's problematic, isn't it? As Dr. Panda and you've been telling us, the question and the doubts of whether aspartame or all these artificial sweeteners are carcinogenic or not, the debate has been going on for a very long time. And we're even having this discussion again now simply because it is no less than the WHO. And the question is that there is a larger problem with the sugar content in all of the packaged foods and beverages per se. Be it artificial sweeteners or even natural sweeteners, the levels of the sugar content per se in products. For example, Nutella, if I were to start, Nutella, which we all think of as a hazelnut spread, a hazelnut chocolate spread, has nothing but 70% sugar. It is, if you include 70% of sugar and palm oil. Sugar and palm oil contribute 70% of Nutella. Your hazelnut and your chocolate and your milk solids contribute only 30% of Nutella. Isn't that sense? Doesn't this awaken everybody to just the sugar levels in all that's available in the shop shelves?
So if you look at the journey India is taking, I think just food labeling and ingredient identification has been a big win. I think so. India has already moved from a place 5-6 years back. You wouldn't actually know what you were consuming. So there has been a stringent. I think right now it's about consumer awareness and consumer movements, right? I believe that if you look at the younger generation, consumption of some products is actually going down. I think there the regulator can play a role. But if you compare with the marketing budgets of some of these deep-pocketed players who are pushing this, right? I think it's very hard to envisage consumption going down unless there's a concerted public health push and the government and the regulator steps in with either aggressive labeling, as they've done for cigarette packets, right? Or there's complete ban on some substances which have been proven to be carcinogenic. But I don't see us getting there at all. So again, I don't think anything much will happen, right?
Right, and nothing much will happen right now, Dr. Panda. That's what Mr. Barnik is saying. Nothing much will happen. You're also laughing on that front. But tell us, if something needs to happen, it's the consumer who's watching this, right? It's the average lay person who's watching this, who has kids in his house, his or her house, who needs to be more careful. And especially people who are, say, in their 30s, 40s, starting to move to other forms of sweeteners. They are the ones that they need to be careful.
Yes, so I completely agree with Barnik. I mean, it's very easy to, very cynical. I mean, as he rightly pointed out, the deep-pocketed multinational companies' advertisement budgets is in billions, and sometimes it's like an Goebbelsian. So if you tell some half truth and lie day in and day out, ultimately they become truth. But having said that, I think I still have hopes that a concrete public movement, not only for artificial sweeteners, but a movement against all those artificial substances which are being pushed into our daily foods by different means. There should be a public movement against that. And as I said again, that it is not only a matter of carcinogen, whether aspartame is carcinogenic or not, in what doses and after how much of, because, from scientific perspective, we need robust epidemiological data to put that and those things. But there is no doubt that it is not good for your body.
Okay.
It's not helping you. So
if you can tell us where we can be more aware, Dr. Panda, what are the foods and beverages that are available, that are generally consumed across the board, that we should all be more aware of and make sure we completely cut it out from our consumption, or at least keep it at the bare minimum?
See, think of all those cold drinks. I mean, what they have. They have some artificial sweeteners, they have some artificial colors, they have water, they have carbon dioxide. These all those potato chips and those, and they have those having Ajinomotos and those, they are really not good for your health. I mean, some of them may or may not be actually harming you, but they are not doing anything. So you are basically pushing some junk foods. All those biscuits have only trans fats, which is basically quite harmful.
My question is that there are people who go for the Diet Coke, and then there are people who have the regular Coca-Cola. So in that sense, is it better to just have one Coca-Cola once a month and then don't bother having one Diet Coke a day? Because that's not really helping anything. In fact, making it worse.
I personally, I don't think. I'm not an expert on Diet Coke recipe, but I really don't think they help. I think it's best if we can avoid them.
Yeah, okay. The problem is that, Dr. Panda, the reason why I'm having this conversation with Mr. Barnik, I'll bring this back to Mr. Barnik as well. Mr. Barnik has been rightly pointing out, people will not stop consuming. No matter what you do, even if they stop the advertisements, there are people who will continue consuming them simply because they're not aware enough. And my problem here is that, people of our age, it's sure to tell them to make some kind of sense to them. But what about the children? What about children whom we have to give in to some of their demands at some stage? And if a 5-year-old wants a glass of Coke, you're going to be able to give it to them. So I know from that perspective, I'm asking Mr. Barnik.
No, see, listen, it's a choice, and nothing in moderation actually harms. So I think it's about extreme consumption which helps, right? So
okay.
I think in my personal opinion, I consume Coke and not Diet Coke, because I would prefer to have a little bit of sugar than expose myself to artificial sweeteners. And a big debate in the house, I have my coffee with sugar and not with artificial sweeteners, because I would much prefer having 1 cup of coffee rather than having 5 cups with artificial sweeteners. So it's a matter
That's what I was asking. Dr. Panda, sorry, just hold on. I see, going to bring this back to Dr. Panda. Dr. Panda, that's what I'm asking about. Isn't it better to go, regulate your sugar consumption, keep it extremely limited, and have the classic regular sugar? Or it could be even brown sugar, or white sugar, as the case may be. Just stick to those sugars, keep it minimal as possible, and get on with it, and forget about any kind of artificial sweetness.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, there is not much difference between actually brown sugar or white sugar. But I for that record, I take my coffee black. What
about jaggery powder, sir?
Even jaggery powder doesn't help. They all have got your sugar. So you must understand that jaggery powder will have equal amount of sugar as much as white sugar. So that's not the, people can have solace that taking jaggery is less sugary, but I don't think that's truth.
Palm sugar, sir.
Other nutritive values,
I'm keeping on asking questions because these are the solutions that are given to anybody who wants to cut down sugar. Take brown sugar.
I don't think what Dr. Barnik is saying. You minimize your sugar consumption. Just take minimum as much as possible, and if you can avoid them, that's the best.
Right.
It's a matter of taste. If you want to have a cup of tea, I would suggest you take it without milk and sugar and try the actual flavor of tea. I initially thought black coffee is bad, but I am now quite fond of that. So it's all matter of taste. But
so what do you have against dairy? I can have the chai. I can have the chai without sugar, but with the milk. What do you have against dairy?
No. Many of the Indians have actually lactose intolerance. So after having milk product, many of them can have So if you do not have a lactose intolerance, by all means, please go ahead and take your milk. But these are some of the common problems. Anyway, I think we're digressing from the fact. But yes, I agree. I personally also like to have a minimal amount of normal sugar than having those artificial sweeteners, because I really don't think they help. They are not. By substituting your sugar, it is better if you can cut down your sugar than try to have substituting your sugar and having some sense of comfort.
Point taken, Dr. Panda, from the doctor's mouth, point taken, take actual sugar. No. Drastically reduce the quantity of the sugar that you take. Also. But the problem is that you can reduce
your sugar consumption. That's the more important thing.
No, I have a different issue. You know, in a muesli bowl or a packet of muesli, in a packet of cornflakes, it's very difficult to figure out how much sugar it actually contains, isn't it, Mr. Barnik?
So, as per latest labeling norms, actually, you will find that the quantity of sugar is actually labeled. They are labeling both added sugar. I think that's the important component. And a lot of these breakfast cereals are nothing but sugar delivery mechanisms. That's why kids love it, and that's why also we as adults love it. So I think in general, if you want to avoid artificial sugars or even processed sugars, stay away from processed food, because all of it have inadvertently got processed sugar. And the other thing is about these variants, which we now are getting popularized by the health movement and the D2C startups. I think all the publicity is coming from them, right?
Right.
If you look at the movement from fried chips to baked chips, right? If you really look at it from a nutrition and what it does for the body, they are not really healthy. They are just look different and they look cooler. So I would again not get
second red flag. Don't baked chips means nothing. Chips is chips. Chips is chips. You bake it, you fry it. Chips is chips.
So again, I would stay away from some of these fads, and again listen to the good old doctor who will say neither is sugar good for you, neither is artificial sugar good for you, and everything in moderation helps. Cut down your consumption and don't focus on fancy alternatives.
Right, I know. As you're saying this is yummy food. You know, images running over there of really yummy, sweet things that I really want to pop in my mouth right now. Dr. Panda, is the same thing. As we discuss the possibility of artificial sweeteners being carcinogenic, it's to do with all of this health fad and the messaging. That is misleading people in this health fad, isn't it, Dr. Panda?
Yeah.
Baked chips and etc. etc.
If I can just tell you, I think the parents have a lot to play in this. In smoking, we know if you do not smoke, you do not start smoking by age of 25, it is less likely you will ever be a smoker. So about this fast food and these Coke and everything, I think that addiction starts from the childhood. So if parents can actually control, and they can only control by being an example by themselves. So if in your breakfast, you can have more of a traditional food. So instead of cornflakes, you can have, poha or idli or, roti sabji. Like a good old, normal, healthy diet. The kids will eat. If you convince them, that's good. And once they eat it regularly, that's become their habit. So if you say that, no cold drinks, no artificial sweetness. Initially, they may be, but if you remain consistent and persistent in your endeavor, that sounds a little old-fashioned, but I believe that is something which is good for everybody.
That's the only way of going about it. It looks like, Dr. Panda. It's not old-fashioned. It's new fashion. It's the future fashion. It's all fashion. Go back to your basics. Eat real foods. Eat real fresh foods. don't eat processed foods, because the moment they get processed, they have all these chemicals going inside them, and God knows which one of them is carcinogenic. I'm afraid we've completely run out of time here in this discussion. I'm going to thank Dr. Dipanjan Panda, Senior Consultant Oncology, Indraprastha Apollo Hospital, for taking time out to be with us, and Mr. Barnik for taking time out to come to us here in our studios. News and Space. Thank you, Mr. Barnik, for taking time out to be with us. And whether it's a wrap here from my side, this is Krishnakumar signing off. Keep it with News 9.
With all this gear, you must be wondering if I'm climbing a mountain. Well, let me give you a wider look of this place. This is Asia's largest mountain of shame.
A mountain of waste, almost the height of the Qutub Minar.
When you enter capital cities of some of the biggest countries in the world, you don't have 3 garbage mountains waiting to welcome you, depending on whichever side of the city you enter from.
The thing is that a lot of times we talk about landfills only when there's a fire at the landfill. You need to understand that a landfill is at fire almost throughout the year. It's only when the firefighters are not able to douse the fire is when it actually catches the nation's attention, the city's attention, or media attention.
The towering